I'm sure every one of you has experienced by now the torture that large Zoom calls can be. You're all staring at the screen, actively participating in one singular conversation, often waiting for an opportunity to take the floor and actually say something, rather than splitting into smaller, more manageable conversations like you'd have at an actual gathering. It didn't help that these Zoom gatherings were a constant reminder of what we had lost. I know my struggles over the past year and a half aren't unique. We've all been trying to find some kind of approximation of the in-person hangout while we've been locked in our homes. One of the ways I spent my time over the past year and a half was video games. I suppose I should say getting back into video games, as I spent a small chunk of my childhood trying and failing to finish games. I have a pretty terrible track record on this front. Until recently, I had never finished a video game. When I was young, I got hopelessly lost in Pokemon Red's Diglett's Cave, and I was bested by Peeves so many times in the first Harry Potter game that I just gave up. I suppose I had terrible coordination and not really any sense of strategy, and a complete lack of stick-to-itiveness that most gamers seem to have. Or maybe I was just too young to have enough of those skills to gain any ground. Over the years, I would dabble in The Sims and Stardew Valley, but I never really dove into games the way that many gamers seem to when they find something that really hooks them. Fast forward a few years, or decades, and I've been dipping my toe back into the world of gaming because I've discovered a lot more games which are more my jam. I found that I'm also more open to trying new things to fill my time. Like a lot of you, I spent a lot of last year trying to make sourdough bread. And like a lot of you, Animal Crossing New Horizons was my personal life raft for the first part of the pandemic. The town-building nature of that game primed me for what would become me finally breaking through and starting to explore the world of gaming. The next critical step in that breakthrough was when a friend introduced me to Don't Starve Together. That was the first video game my friends and I played together, and it was back in late 2020. It provided us with a way to connect, aside from the standard Zoom calls, and in a more dynamic way too. Don't Starve is a survival crafting game where you try to survive a punishing environment by creating items and shelters. As the name implies, you have to manage your character's hunger levels and not starve, as well as your character's health, temperature, and sanity in this Burton-esque dimension that your character finds itself in. But critically for me, you don't necessarily need god-tier reaction times or a mastery of complex controls. That being said, anyone who's played it knows that you die easy and you die often. But when you have more players working towards the same basic common goals, such as building fires or building a base, you've got a much better chance at surviving. I mean, it's right there in the name, Don't Starve Together. While most of us came to this game as a way to spend free time while we're stuck at home, we quickly learned how to work together as a team and brush off the many missteps one of us might make at any given time, such as burning down the base once or twice, or maybe even thrice. And it felt great to work together to beat a boss or make it through winter for the first time. We all slid easily into our roles in order to get ready for the next season. But at the same time, we need to coordinate to avoid duplicating efforts and working at cross purposes, since Don't Starve is a little bit too unforgiving to allow for that. So we always kept a voice chat going while we played. In a way, it reminded me of when we'd go camping together, and everyone would pitch in so that the group as a whole could succeed. But for Don't Starve, just like camping, while it's a ton of fun, I don't know that you could say that you're truly comfortable. While Don't Starve showed us that we could hang out and play together, having our base destroyed for the 37th time got a little bit stressful for us. So, along with what feels like the rest of the world, my friends and I picked up Valheim a few months back. A lot has been said about how great this early access game is, but today I want to share how Valheim has captured the best part of that virtual camping kind of experience that I found in Don't Starve. It became one of the most important tools for me to stay connected with friends despite the pandemic, and has otherwise smoothed over some of the rough edges of 2020 and 2021, at least for me. Valheim is also a survival craft game in which you're transported to a world of monsters and Vikings. Not unlike Don't Starve, you start off with nothing more than yourself and have to spend your time gathering resources, building a home, fighting enemies, and exploring different environments. As you discover new biomes, there are different resources you can gather. For example, once you discover the swamp biome which houses iron deposits, you can start upgrading all your bronze weapons to stronger iron ones. The game encourages building a base where you can heal up and craft items, which will make exploring easier and safer, especially for those of us who might be a little scared of monsters. While these kinds of games aren't for everyone to begin with, I found that Valheim at least gives players a little bit more breathing room before they're at risk of losing. And that translated into more time for us to coordinate, collaborate, and build together before we decided to go off and do something dangerous like fighting a boss. We spend a good chunk of our in-game hours doing our own thing, fighting, fishing, building, exploring, while also working towards a general joint goal or project. Like any teamwork, there have also been points of friction which we've learned to laugh off or otherwise implement novel solutions. In spite of any potential friction though, the game allows you to proceed at an unhurried pace, minimizing the stress and tension that often go hand in hand with online multiplayer games. Often, after the main tasks are done, or after everyone's a little bit too tipsy to care. I mean, I did say this was like camping, right? Did you think we were doing this all serious and sober the whole time? We've found ourselves standing around or sitting on our deck, taking in the view and chatting amongst ourselves during one of the many quiet moments this game has. It's from those moments that I realized that this experience is much more than a video game. As I mentioned, Zoom calls can be a bit awkward. There's something intangible missing that doesn't quite allow video calls to achieve the same level of comfort as you'd have actually hanging out with your friends IRL. But Valheim has sneakily gotten us closer to those in-person moments by providing us with common goals to focus on and work towards while we chat. Most of the time we're playing, we're talking about game-related things, but those game-related topics and tasks provide momentum for the overall hangout. And Valheim is forgiving enough that it gives us breathing room to hang out and chat about non-game topics. These quiet nights in Valheim also remind me of my university days, when I lived in a walk-up apartment with 3 other people. There are countless nights when we'd be dirtling around and doing our own thing, but hanging out in the living room together, getting progressively drunker and sillier, and just growing closer to each other each day. In Valheim, we've recreated that nostalgic atmosphere, as most of our in-game days are kind of mundane and can be done at a leisurely pace. This allows us plenty of room to stray beyond the more mechanical or militaristic coordination that you might think is typical in an online multiplayer game. Like Don't Starve, the fundamental controls are also pretty easy. We don't have to worry too much about coordinating our movements to defeat an enemy. We're mostly just gathering resources for whatever project we're prepping for, whether it be cooking before a boss fight, building a summer patio, or going on a huge sailing expedition. These quote-unquote mundane tasks and the quiet conversation which have been accompanying them have turned into a cozy routine. In a year where routines, among many other things we had taken for granted, were completely upended, this unexpected gem of a game became a grounding force for me. While the world is inching closer to something approximating normalcy, I'm hoping we can hold on to those cozy nights and make it past the mountain biome. As you might have guessed, we aren't anywhere near completing the early access content. We're also not anywhere near done with Don't Starve, because there's still plenty of road to walk in that game. We haven't beaten most of the bosses, and the caves continue to fill me with a giddy sort of terror. Our theory is that Valheim was designed to be a slow burn game. You aren't meant to launch yourself into the next boss fight and cheese your way through it. You're meant to grind a little bit while you get ready, and enjoy the virtual sunsets and actual conversations that you have along the way. Or maybe that's what we tell ourselves as we justify holding on to the quiet moments for just a little bit longer. Thanks for listening.